What happens when a legendary British actor sits down for what should be a friendly chat, only to be met with hostility, condescension, and outright disrespect? In just 40 seconds, one comment from the host will ignite a confrontation so explosive that it will force a Hollywood icon to do something he has never done before: walk off a live television set. This is the story of how Denise Welch turned a simple interview into a battlefield, and how Michael Caine refused to be her target. The studio lights were bright that morning. The Loose Women panel was seated and ready. Denise Welch sat in the center, flanked by Nadia Sawalha, Janet Street Porter, and Colleen Nolan. They were chatting among themselves as the cameras prepared to roll. The energy was casual, relaxed, just another day on the daytime talk show. But what was about to unfold would be anything but ordinary. Michael Caine walked onto the set to warm applause from the studio audience. He was wearing a dark suit, so looking every bit the distinguished gentleman he had always been. At 80 years old, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. He waved to the crowd, smiled politely, and took his seat on the guest couch. Denise Welch started the interview with what seemed like a simple introduction. She looked directly at Michael and said, "Well, it is lovely to have you here today, Michael. Though I must say, we were quite surprised you even agreed to come on. I mean, you do not really do much press anymore, do you?" Michael chuckled lightly. He was not fazed. "I do press when there is something worth talking about. And today, I thought this would be a nice conversation." Denise nodded, but her smile did not reach her eyes. "Right. Well, let us talk about your new book, then. You have written quite a few memoirs now, have you not? Some might say you are milking the same stories over and over." The room went quiet. Nadia Sawalha shifted in her seat. Janet Street Porter raised her eyebrows. Colleen Nolan glanced down at her notes. The audience, too, seemed to hold its breath. Michael Caine, however, remained composed. He leaned back slightly and said, "Well, I suppose when you have lived a life like mine, there are quite a few stories to tell, and people seem to enjoy hearing them. Otherwise, I would not keep being asked to share them, would I?" Denise was not backing down. She leaned forward, her tone becoming sharper. "But do you not think there comes a point where it is just self-indulgent? I mean, how many times can you tell the same story about Alfie or the Italian Job before it gets tiresome?" Janet Street Porter jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, Denise. The man is a living legend. I think he has earned the right to talk about his career." But Denise waved her off. "I am just being honest, Janet. I think our viewers appreciate honesty. And honestly, I find it a bit boring when celebrities keep recycling the same material. It feels lazy." Michael's jaw tightened just slightly. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. "Lazy? I have worked in this industry for over 60 years. I have made more than 130 films. I have won 2 Academy Awards. And you are calling me lazy?" Denise shrugged. "I'm just saying what I think. And I think that when someone keeps writing the same book with a different title, it is a bit of a cash grab. That is all." Nadia Sawalha tried to step in again. "Michael, I have read your books, and I think they are wonderful. Each one has a different focus, a different perspective. I do not think they are repetitive at all." Michael nodded at her, appreciating the support. "Thank you, Nadia. I think the people who read my work would agree with you." But Denise was not done. She turned to him with a condescending smile. "Well, maybe your fans are just not very discerning. I mean, they will buy anything with your name on it, will they not? That is the power of celebrity. You could write your shopping list, and people would probably buy it." That was it. That was the moment. Michael Caine set his jaw, his eyes flashing with something the panel had not seen before: genuine anger. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Denise, I came here today because I was told this would be a respectful conversation. I was told I would be welcomed as a guest on this show. But from the moment I sat down, you have done nothing but insult me and my work. Now, I don't know what your problem is, and frankly, I don't care. But I will not sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has an agenda." Denise blinked, taken aback. She tried to recover with a laugh. "Oh, come on, Michael. I'm just having a bit of fun. Can you not take a joke?" Michael shook his head. "A joke is supposed to be funny. What you are doing is not funny. It is rude, and I have no interest in being the punchline for your entertainment." Colleen Nolan finally spoke up, her voice gentle. "Michael, I think we just got off on the wrong foot here. Maybe we can start over? Talk about something else?" Michael looked at Colleen, and for a moment it seemed like he might relent. But then Denise spoke again, her tone dismissive. "Oh, please. He is just being sensitive. I am sure he has heard worse in his career." "Right. Michael, you are a big boy. You can handle a little criticism." Michael's expression hardened. "Criticism? Is that what you call this? Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you are trying to make yourself look clever at my expense, and I will not be a part of it." Denise rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go. The big movie star cannot handle a little pushback. How very fragile of you." That was the final straw. Michael stood up from the couch. The studio went completely silent. Even the crew behind the cameras froze. He looked down at Denise, his voice steady, but filled with quiet authority. "I have been in this business longer than you have been alive. I have worked with some of the greatest directors, actors, and writers in the world, and not once have I been treated with such disrespect on a television program. You should be ashamed of yourself." Denise tried to laugh it off, but her voice wavered. "Oh, sit down, Michael. You are being ridiculous." Michael did not sit down. He turned to the other panelists. "Nadia, Janet, Colleen, it was lovely to meet you. I am sorry our conversation was cut short, but I will not stay where I am not wanted." He then looked back at Denise, his gaze piercing. "And as for you, Denise, I suggest you take a long, hard look at how you treat people, because one day you might find that no one wants to come on your show anymore, and it will be entirely your fault." With that, Michael Caine unclipped his microphone, set it down on the coffee table, and walked off the set. The cameras followed him as he made his way toward the exit. The audience was stunned. Some people started to applaud. Others sat in shocked silence. Nadia Sawalha covered her mouth with her hand, clearly mortified. Janet Street Porter shook her head in disbelief. Colleen Nolan looked down at her lap, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Denise, meanwhile, sat frozen in her seat. Her face was pale. For a moment, she seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Then, as the producers started scrambling in the background, she tried to regain control. "Well, that was, unexpected," she said, forcing a laugh. "I suppose Michael Caine does not have much of a sense of humor after all." But no one was laughing. Janet Street Porter finally spoke up, her voice sharp. "Denise, that was completely out of line. You cannot treat a guest like that. I do not care who you are, or what you think." That was disgraceful." Nadia Sawalha nodded in agreement. "I cannot believe you just did that. Michael Caine is a national treasure, and you humiliated him on live television. How could you?" Denise tried to defend herself. "I was just asking questions. I was just being honest. Is that not what we are supposed to do on this show?" Colleen Nolan finally looked up, her voice quiet but firm. "There is a difference between being honest and being cruel, Denise. And what you just did was cruel." Denise opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the director called for a commercial break. The cameras cut away. The producers rushed onto the set, their faces tight with panic. The other panelists immediately stood up and walked off, leaving Denise sitting alone at the table. Behind the scenes, the tension was palpable. Michael Caine was already on his way out of the building. A producer tried to stop him, apologizing profusely. But Michael just shook his head. "It is too late for apologies," he said quietly. "I came here in good faith, and I was treated appallingly. I will not be returning." Back on the set, the other panelists were having their own heated conversation. Janet Street Porter was pacing back and forth, her arms crossed. "I cannot believe she did that," she muttered. What was she thinking? Nadia Sawalha was sitting on the edge of a makeup counter, her head in her hands. She has been getting worse lately. The snide comments, the digs at guests. But this was a new low. Colleen Nolan stood nearby, her arms wrapped around herself. "I feel terrible. We should have said something sooner. We should have stopped her before it got to that point." Janet turned to face them. "We tried. Did you not hear us trying to steer the conversation away?" But she would not let it go. She was determined to provoke him. Nadia looked up, her eyes flashing with anger. She was on a power trip. She wanted to prove that she could take down a Hollywood legend. And now, look what has happened. He walked off. Michael Caine walked off our show. Do you know how bad that makes us look? Colleen sighed. It is not just about how we look. It is about how we treated him. He did not deserve that. No one deserves that. Meanwhile, Denise was still sitting at the panel table. A producer approached her, his face stern. "Denise, we need to talk." "That was completely unacceptable. You crossed a line." Denise looked up at him, her defiance beginning to crack. "I was just doing my job. I was asking the tough questions." The producer shook his head. "Tough questions are one thing. What you did was attack a guest. And now he has walked off. And we have a massive problem on our hands. The phones are already ringing off the hook with complaints." Denise's face fell. For the first time, and she seemed to realize the gravity of what had just happened. I did not think he would actually leave." The producer stared at her. "Well, he did. And now, we have to figure out how to salvage the rest of this show." As the commercial break came to an end, the panelists reluctantly returned to their seats. Denise was noticeably subdued. Her usual bravado was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. The cameras came back on, and she tried to address what had just happened. "Well, as you all just saw, Michael Caine has decided to leave the show," she said, her voice lacking its earlier confidence. I suppose we had a difference of opinion, and he chose to walk off, which is of course his right." Janet Street Porter immediately interjected. "A difference of opinion? Denise, you insulted the man repeatedly. You called his work self-indulgent. You mocked his fans, and you accused him of being a cash grabber. That is not a difference of opinion. That is just plain rude." Nadia Sawalha nodded. "I have to agree with Janet. Michael Caine came here as a guest, and we should have treated him with respect. Instead, he was met with hostility. I am embarrassed, to be honest." Colleen Nolan added quietly, "I just hope he knows that not all of us feel the way Denise does. He is a legend, and he deserves better than what happened here today." Denise tried to defend herself one more time. "Look, I stand by what I said. I think it is important to challenge our guests, to ask the questions that other people might not ask." But Janet was having none of it. "There is a difference between challenging someone and being disrespectful, and you were disrespectful. End of story." The show continued, but the damage was done. The atmosphere was awkward and tense. Denise barely spoke for the rest of the episode. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, she stood up quickly and left the set without saying a word to anyone. In the green room, a member of the production team found Michael Caine's coat still hanging on a hook. He had left so quickly that he had forgotten it. The team member held it carefully, unsure of what to do. Eventually, they decided to send it to him with a handwritten note of apology from the entire crew, but not from Denise. The other panelists gathered together after the show. They were still processing what had happened. Nadia Sawalha was the first to speak. "I cannot work with her anymore. Not after today. She has no respect for anyone but herself. Janet Street Porter nodded. I have been saying this for months. She is becoming a liability. Today, just proved it. Colleen Nolan looked at both of them. Do you think the producers will do anything about it? Nadia shrugged. They should. But who knows? All I know is that I am not going to sit there and watch her treat guests like that anymore. Am done. Back at the studio, the producers were in full crisis mode. The phones were ringing non-stop. Viewers were calling in to complain about Denise's behavior. Social media was exploding with criticism. The consensus was clear. Denise Welch had gone too far, and Michael Caine had been right to walk off. One producer was overheard saying, "We are going to have to address this. We cannot just sweep it under the rug. This is a disaster." Another added, "The thing is, Michael Caine is beloved. Everyone loves him. And now they are going to associate us with disrespecting him. That is not a good look." Meanwhile, Michael Caine had returned to his home. He sat in his study, still wearing the dark suit from the interview. His wife asked him how it had gone. He simply shook his head and said, "It was a mistake. I should never have agreed to go on that show." His wife sat down next to him. "What happened?" Michael sighed. "The host, Denise Welch, I spent the entire interview insulting me. She called my work self-indulgent. She said I was lazy. She mocked my fans. And when I tried to defend myself, she accused me of being too sensitive. I could not take it anymore. So I left." His wife reached out and squeezed his hand. "You did the right thing. No one should have to sit there and be treated like that. I am proud of you for standing up for yourself." Michael nodded. "I have been doing this for 60 years. I have faced critics, you tough journalists, difficult directors, but I have never been treated with such open contempt. It was as if she was trying to humiliate me on purpose." His wife shook her head. "Well, she certainly made a fool of herself. Everyone will be talking about this, and they will not be talking kindly about her. I can tell you that." Back at the Loose Women's studio, Denise Welch was sitting in her dressing room. She was staring at her phone, scrolling through the reactions online. Every tweet, every comment, every post was condemning her. People were calling her arrogant, rude, unprofessional. Some were even calling for her to be removed from the show. She threw her phone down on the couch and covered her face with her hands. For the first time since the interview, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what she had done. Michael Caine was not just any guest. He was a legend, and she had driven him off the set. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was one of the producers. He stepped inside, his expression serious. "Denise, we need to talk about what happened today." Denise looked up at him, her eyes red. I know I messed up." The producer nodded. "You did more than mess up. You humiliated a respected guest on live television, and now the entire country is talking about it. We are getting calls from advertisers, from the network, from everyone. This is a public relations nightmare." Denise swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" The producer hesitated. "I am saying that there are going to be consequences. I do not know what they are yet, but this is not going to just blow over. You need to prepare yourself for that." Denise nodded slowly. She did not have the energy to argue. She just sat there, staring at the floor, as the producer left the room. The silence was deafening. Outside the studio, a group of fans had gathered. They were holding signs that read, "We stand with Michael Caine," and "Denise Welch should apologize." The crowd was peaceful, but determined. They wanted to make their voices heard. One fan, a woman in her 60s, was interviewed by a local news crew. "Michael Caine is a national treasure," she said passionately. "He has given us so many incredible films, so many unforgettable performances. And for him to be treated like that on television is just disgraceful. Denise Welch should be ashamed of herself." Another fan, a young man in his 20s, added, "I grew up watching Michael Caine movies with my dad. He is a legend, and to see him walk off that set, you could tell he was genuinely hurt. That was hard to watch." Inside the studio, the other panelists were still talking among themselves. Nadia Sawala was pacing back and forth. "I just keep thinking about his face when he stood up. He looked so disappointed. Not angry, just disappointed. Like he expected better from us." Janet Street Porter sighed. "He did expect better, and we let him down. Well, Denise let him down, but we sat there and let it happen." Colleen Nolan shook her head. "We did try to stop her, though. We tried to change the subject, to lighten the mood, but she would not listen. She was determined to push him." Nadia stopped pacing and looked at them. "Do you think he will ever forgive us?" Janet shrugged. "I do not know, but I would not blame him if he did not." That evening, the episode aired on television. Viewers across the country watched in shock as Michael Caine walked off the set. Social media exploded with reactions. Hashtags like Team Michael Caine and Denise Welch Apology started trending. News outlets picked up the story, running headlines like "Hollywood Legend Walks Off Loose," "Women After Hostile Interview," and "Michael Caine Refuses to Be Disrespected by Denise Welch." The consensus was overwhelming. Michael Caine had done the right thing, and Denise Welch had crossed a line. Some commentators praised Michael for standing up for himself, calling it a powerful moment of self-respect. Others criticized Denise for her behavior, accusing her of trying to provoke a reaction for the sake of ratings. One entertainment journalist wrote, "Michael Caine has been a class act his entire career. To see him walk off a set is almost unprecedented. That tells you everything you need to know about how he was treated. Denise Welch owes him, and the viewers, an apology." Another wrote, "Denise Welch has always been known for her blunt, no-nonsense approach. But there is a difference between being direct and being cruel. Today, she crossed that line, and Michael Caine was not going to stand for it." At his home, Michael Caine was not watching the coverage. He had no interest in reliving the experience. Instead, he was sitting in his study, reading a book, trying to put the whole incident behind him. But his phone kept buzzing with messages of support from friends, colleagues, and fans. Each one thanked him for standing up for himself and condemned Denise's behavior. One message from a fellow actor read, "Saw what happened on Loose Women. Good for you for walking off. You did not deserve to be treated like that. Stay strong, mate." Another message from a director said, "Just watch the interview. Unbelievable. You handled it with grace, as always. Denise Welch should be ashamed." Michael read each message but did not respond. He appreciated the support, but he did not want to dwell on the negativity. He had said his piece, and he had walked away. That was enough. Back at the Loose Women studio, the mood was somber. The producers were meeting behind closed doors, discussing how to handle the fallout. Denise Welch was notably absent from the meeting. She had gone home, unable to face anyone. One producer was heard saying, "We need to issue a statement, something that acknowledges what happened without throwing Denise under the bus." Another replied, "But what can we say? The footage speaks for itself. She was out of line, and everyone knows it." A third producer added, "We also need to think about the other panelists. Nadia, Janet, and Colleen all tried to intervene. They should not be lumped in with Denise's behavior." The meeting dragged on for hours. Eventually, a statement was drafted. It read, "We at Loose Women value respectful and engaging conversations with all of our guests. We regret that today's interview did not meet that standard. We apologize to Michael Caine for any discomfort caused and appreciate his many contributions to film and entertainment." The statement was carefully worded to avoid directly blaming Denise, but it was clear who was responsible. The damage had been done, and no statement could undo it. At her home, Denise Welch was sitting in her living room, staring at the television. The interview was being replayed on the news, over and over again. Each time she watched it, she felt a little more sick to her stomach. She had thought she was being clever, that she was challenging a complacent celebrity, but now, seeing it from the outside, she realized how it looked. She had been cruel. There was no other word for it. Her phone rang. It was her agent. She answered reluctantly. "Hello?" Her agent's voice was tense. "Denise, we need to talk. This is bad. Really bad. I have been getting calls all day from journalists, from the network, from everyone. They want a statement from you." Denise closed her eyes. "What should I say?" Her agent sighed. "You need to apologize, and you need to mean it. This is not going to blow over unless you take responsibility." Denise nodded, even though her agent could not see her. "Okay, I will do it." But even as she said the words, she knew that an apology might not be enough. The damage was done. Michael Caine had walked off her show, and the entire world had seen it. She had humiliated a legend, and there was no taking that back. That night, Denise sat down at her computer and began drafting an apology. She wrote and rewrote it dozens of times, trying to find the right words. But no matter how she phrased it, it felt hollow. She had crossed a line, and she knew it, and so did everyone else. Meanwhile, Michael Caine was at peace. He had done what he needed to do. He had stood up for himself, and he had walked away from a toxic situation. And in the end, that was all that mattered. He did not need an apology from Denise Welch. He did not need validation from the media. He knew his worth, and he refused to let anyone diminish it. The next morning, the story was still dominating the headlines. Michael Caine's walk-off had become a cultural moment, a symbol of self-respect and dignity in the face of disrespect. People were talking about it everywhere, in offices, in coffee shops, on social media. It had struck a chord. One viewer tweeted, "Michael Caine walking off loose women is the most iconic thing I have seen all year. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult anyone. He just stood up and left. That is how you handle disrespect." Another wrote, "Denise Welch thought she could bully a legend into submission, but Michael Caine is not the one. He has too much class for that." At the Loose Women studio, the atmosphere was tense. The panelists were preparing for the next show, but no one knew what to say. Denise Welch had not returned to the studio. The producers had decided to give her a few days off to let the dust settle. In her absence, the other panelists felt a strange sense of relief. Nadia Sawalha spoke up. "I think we need to address what happened. We cannot just pretend it did not occur. The viewers deserve to hear from us." Janet Street Porter agreed. "Absolutely. We need to make it clear that we do not condone what happened. We need to show that we respect our guests, and that what Denise did does not represent the show as a whole." Colleen Nolan nodded. "I think we also need to acknowledge that we tried to step in. We did not just sit there silently. We tried to steer the conversation away, but Denise would not let it go." The producers agreed to let them address it on the next show. It was a risky move, but it was necessary. The audience needed to see that the rest of the panel did not share Denise's attitude. When the cameras rolled the next day, the three remaining panelists sat together, their faces serious. Nadia Sawalha spoke first. "We want to take a moment to address what happened earlier this week with Michael Caine. As many of you saw, he walked off the show after a very difficult interview with Denise. We want to make it clear that we did not agree with the way he was treated. We tried to intervene, but unfortunately, the conversation got out of hand." Janet Street Porter continued, "Michael Caine is a legend, and he deserved to be treated with respect. What happened was not acceptable, and we want to apologize to him on behalf of the show. We hope he knows that we value him and his contributions to film." Colleen Nolan added, "We also want to thank our viewers for their patience and understanding during this difficult time. We know that many of you were upset by what you saw, and we hear you. We are committed to doing better in the future. The statement was well received. Viewers appreciated the honesty and the accountability, but the question remained, what would happen to Denise Welch? Would she return to the show? Would she face consequences for her actions? For now, the answer was unclear, but one thing was certain. Michael Caine had walked off that set with his dignity intact, and Denise Welch would have to live with the consequences of her behavior for a long time to come. The moment had been captured on camera, immortalized for everyone to see, and it would not be forgotten anytime soon. Michael Caine, meanwhile, had moved on. He was back to his life, his work, his family. The interview was behind him. He had stood up for himself, and that was enough. He did not need validation from the world. He knew who he was, and he knew his worth, and that was something no one, not even Denise Welch, could take away from him.